Thanks very much, and thanks everyone for coming. I'm glad you could make it, and you could tell some of your friends that what it was like to actually get in the room. So, this is really a special day for us, for ILR, for me as a lifelong baseball fan. The closest I got to Major League Baseball was in my sophomore year in high school. I played third base for the Division III Massachusetts State Championship baseball team. And I'm wearing my gold ring today from that.
That's way better than I did.
From that game. I never wear it, but I figured, yeah, today I'll wear it. So. Rob's made ILR a priority for a long time. You know, he's just become commissioner this past year, but he's made ILR a priority for a long time, and we really appreciate that, Rob. You inspire a set of students not only in ILR but across the university. I don't want to talk too much in advance because we want to hear what Rob has to say and have you ask some questions, but I want to say a couple things about him. Like most of his classmates from the class of 1980 from ILR, he graduated from high school in New York State, from Rome Free Academy in 1980. Like most of his classmates at the time, this isn't true in ILR anymore, but like most of his classmates at the time, he was interested in law. Like a few students in ILR in those days, and even a few today, he went on to Harvard Law School, including at least one person I think who's in this room who's going to go to Harvard Law School. Fewer graduated with honors from Harvard Law, and even fewer were articles editor of the Harvard Law Review. A few were able to clerk for U.S. District Court judges, including in the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, like Rob. Some went on to become partners in fancy law firms, like Rob did, like in Morgan Lewis. Where he became partner and became involved in Major League Baseball from that side in 1988. He's unusual, though, in some other ways. He's wicked smart. He's incredibly hardworking. And he's only worked for a few employers. And many of you will probably work for lots of employers, but Rob's worked for very few employers. That's quite unusual. He's been at MLB since 1998. And was the Executive VP of Labor Relations for 15 years, including negotiations for collective bargaining agreements multiple times. He became the Chief Operating Officer in 2013, and he was elected commissioner last year and became commissioner in January of this year. So this is only his 86th day as commissioner of Major League Baseball, and he's spending one of his first 100 days with us, which we really appreciate. So thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask a few questions to start, and then we're going to go around and open up some questions from you, if you're well behaved, and if not, we'll just go back to me. One of the questions, this was actually submitted by one of the students that I wrote to. So how was working in the Labor Relations Department of Major League Baseball? How did that prepare you for your role as commissioner, and what have been the surprises that you weren't expecting as commissioner?
Well, let me say this. I think that professional sports is unique in the opportunity that it provides for people who are interested in labor relations and work in that area. And I think that it's really for two reasons. At the end of the day, our product is our players, and understanding what the relationship is with your players is really crucial to being able to effectively run the business. I think the second reason is because you're in a multi-employer bargaining setting, and because of the overlay of the antitrust laws, a lot of your key economic issues are included in your labor negotiations. Our revenue sharing plan is a basic agreement provision. Our debt regulations are basic agreement provisions. Frankly, evaluations that we do of related party broadcast transactions are all done as part of our labor agreement. So it gives you, in professional sports, labor gives you an opportunity to really broaden your portfolio and understand the whole business, including, as I started with, the most important part of the business, which is the players. I have to say, I haven't been surprised about a ton of things. One thing that has struck me is people pay attention to even your most offhand remarks. Yeah, particularly when you have cameras, and we have cameras here, you have to be careful. It's actually gotten to be a joke in the office. I did an interview with ESPN right at the beginning, right after I became commissioner, and they're asking me about changes that we might make to get more offense in the game, and I said, well, we're not really at the point that we've decided we should make any changes. And then he asked another follow-up, and I tried to duck again, and then finally he said, well, just any kind of off-the-wall idea you might think of. So I made some comment about eliminating defensive shifts. Well, it set off this maelstrom of activity, some of which, I must admit, questioned my intellect and capacity to handle the job. But a lot of it was really, just unbelievably thoughtful. People pay so much attention to the game, had thought about this issue, were analytical about the issue, and it actually advanced our internal debate. So the more we talked about it, the more I thought, this is actually a great thing to get out there that, baseball is always thinking about the game, to put ideas out there and have fans engage and tell you what they think about these ideas, and then, have the humility to say, that wasn't the best suggestion I've ever made. We thought sort of ended up being a good thing at the end of the day, but I was surprised by the level of interest.
I want to ask about underrepresented minorities in baseball. And so ILR has a large fraction of underrepresented minority players. ILR has the largest fraction of underrepresented minority students at Cornell in first-generation college students. But the ILR faculty diversity doesn't match that student diversity. And the same might be said of the managers. And I wonder if you or other executives in baseball, and I wonder if you want to comment on how you or maybe a new dean of ILR who started the same week you did might do to improve these things in our places.
Well, we worry about this issue. I mean, we think it's an important issue. Baseball has sort of a unique history in terms of diversity. I mean, April 15th is, for those of you who think it's tax day, you're wrong. It's Jackie Robinson Day. And Jackie Robinson's significance is really not just that he broke the color barrier in baseball, but in fact that he fueled a movement that led to tremendous social change. So this is an issue that's sort of near and dear to our heart. With respect to managers specifically, we try to get at this issue in two ways. We do have a minority interviewing requirement for field managers. When there's a field manager opening, the clubs are required to speak to the commissioner's office. We provide them with candidates. They have to identify candidates, and there has to be minorities in the process. The second thing may be more important, and that is we are always looking for opportunities to get more minorities involved in entry-level positions. Baseball is one of those institutions where people kind of grow in the game. And it's very important. You can't start with a field manager position at the major league level, which is a huge job with tremendous responsibility, and have somebody come in cold and take that job. You have to have a pipeline of people who are working in the minor leagues, working their way up, becoming coaches at the major league level in order to make sure that you have candidates that are qualified for the position. So it's just, I think it's one of those day-to-day in the trenches issues that we really need to pay a lot of attention to.
I want to ask about the pace of play, which several students wrote to me about your sort of views on the pace of play and how you might address critics who believe that this might impact the integrity of the game.
Well, let me start by saying pace of game, I think people have the misimpression that a bunch of suits sat around in New York and decided last November that we needed an initiative on pace of game. The reality is that this is an issue that started in the commissioner selection process. As I was out with the clubs being interviewed and talking to clubs about how the process was going to work, not only me, but all the candidates heard from the clubs. We're hearing from fans that pace of game is an issue. Some clubs had gone so far they'd actually done research, focus groups with fans, and they had research to support it. So after the election, we did some research of our own, and it was in fact consistent with what we were hearing anecdotally and what the research the clubs had done was showing. So this is a bottom-up problem. We didn't decide we had an issue and get out of it. Secondly, on-field issues are the most difficult issues. You know, people ask, what are the hard projects you have? You know, they think you're going to say a labor agreement, whatever. To me, the hardest project I've been involved in was the expansion of instant replay, and it's because it's an on-field project. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, I didn't play. You know, I didn't even play as long as you played, but I did play. But when you haven't played the game on the field, you have to go to people who have in order to make sure you understand what the changes you make are going to yield in terms of results on the field. Secondly, if you make a mistake with respect to an on-the-field issue, you own it for 2,430 games that all of your fans watch, because you can't change in the middle of, you can't change the rules in the middle of the season. You're stuck with it for a year, and there are 2,430 of them that happen every year. So we try to proceed slowly with respect to on-field changes. What we did here, we tested a bunch of changes in the Arizona Fall League, which is our top prospect league. There are a lot of them we liked. We took two what I regard to be very modest changes that should have little or no impact on the way that the game is played and deployed them at the major league level this year. First one was a clock on inning breaks. Now breaks, right? Got nothing to do with the play of the game. It's breaks. We owe our advertisers $2.25 or $2.45 if it's a national game. We were routinely running over 3 minutes, 3:15, 3:20. Do that times 18, right? 18 half innings. You got some real time there. This is just about, making people aware that there's a time limit. So we don't think that should affect the play of the game on the field. Second one is the batter's box rule. Requires the batter essentially to keep a foot in the batter's box. Almost every player in the major leagues played with that rule in minor league baseball. So they played that way in minor league baseball. They played well enough that they became major leaguers. We don't really think it's going to have that big an impact on the way the game is played. More important, we think the two changes, they've worked well early. We're really pleased with the early returns on pace of game, and most important, it's responsive to what we heard from the fans.
I want to ask about increasing viewership. So what audiences are you trying to target? Are you concentrating in the U.S. at a different generation, internationally, sort of speaking to the sort of long-term viability of the game?
Well, there's lots of viewership issues. Let me focus on two that I think are really important. Number one, we are taking advantage of the fact that we own a world-class technology company, MLB Advanced Media. Just this week, 2 days ago, we deployed a new product called StatCast. It is a broadcast enhancement product that is designed to allow fans to understand what goes on the field better and engage more fully with the game, not to distract from the game, but engage more fully with the game. It does things like measures player movements on the field, explains to you, for example, if I make a great catch in center field, it shows you Rob Manfred made that great catch because he took the perfect path to the ball, and it shows you that with video, okay? Someone who tries to steal a base, it analyzes how fast he moved in different segments, compares that to other times when that same runner may have been safer out. And we think that's really important to engage young people with technology. Nothing is better at engaging young people than using technology to enhance the product, and we think that's crucial. The second viewership issue that we're really interested in, I think there were 12 markets where Major League Baseball was the #1 rated television program throughout the summer, 12 local markets. We are working very hard to try to make sure that the huge audiences we draw at the local level stay with us into the postseason. One of the things that happens is, you do great in Detroit all summer, disaster strikes, Detroit goes out in the first round and, people turn off. They don't stay with us. So one of the things, we're working with our broadcast partners, Turner, ESPN, Fox, to try to develop storylines in our national broadcast during the course of the year, the ESPN games, the Turner games, the Fox games, develop storylines that help us keep people engaged into the postseason, even if their team doesn't make it. We were lucky last year. If you look at the numbers in the World Series, for the markets we had, San Francisco and KC, the numbers were actually pretty good. We think that's because we were lucky enough to get the Kansas City story. The Kansas City story is a great story. Mm-hmm. Hadn't been in the playoffs forever, small market team, and it did engage people. We just got to be better at making sure that we're developing those storylines and not relying on the chance of Kansas City happening to be a great story.
I'm going to ask one more question about technology and media before we ask for student questions. So technological innovation it's remarkable. I can watch the Red Sox. I was watching a Red Sox game on my phone while I was in San Francisco watching the Giants play last year, which was great. But baseball has an antitrust exemption for some things, which helps it create blackout rules to create local broadcast monopolies. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you want to comment on that and the future of that.
Look, I think all sports, people get confused between the baseball antitrust exemption and the Sports Broadcasting Act that has, its own protections for all sports, not just baseball. Mm-hmm. I don't think that local broadcast rules are really a product of the antitrust law. They're sort of a fundamental part of a league structure. And let me tell you what I mean by that. If you didn't have, some teams have a national following, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox. If you didn't have protection for teams in smaller markets, those games, particularly now, given the way that games are distributed, would have distribution across the United States and would create even further competitive disadvantages for those small markets. So I think of it as a rule exemption or no exemption that would be defensible under a rule of reason because it is necessary, in fact fundamental, to your ability to have a league with competitive balance. And remember, at the end of the day, we sell competition. That's what we sell. And when the games aren't competitive, your product isn't.
It's easier for me to
I'm going to ask about revenue later.
Okay.
I saw.
We
Go
love
ahead,
that
right
MLB.TV.
Do we have a microphone coming around? Are we going to do that? Or maybe we can repeat the question. Go ahead.
And the Astros had their regional sports network go bankrupt. Do you think that's just two random acts, or do you think that may be something that happens in the future as more and more teams get their own networks?
Well, look, I think that the media landscape is changing dramatically. You got mega mergers, Comcast and Time Warner going on right now. I think that the regulatory process and the fact that it hasn't been completed has probably exacerbated the distribution problems in LA. The cable model is under some pressure. You're seeing all these over-the-top products, some of which, like HBO Now, the streaming that you do for HBO Now is done by MLB Advanced Media. It's part of our business. But I don't think that the cable model is going to fundamentally change. I think that you're going to need someone to bundle entertainment options, and whether they're delivered via the internet or they're delivered via cable, I think that bundling is still going to go on, and I think that baseball is going to remain a really important part of making a bundle appealing because it's live sports, it's what people will pay to see. And so when you sit where I sit, I think you take solace in the fact that the content's going to continue to have value. The Pirates guy's got to be next.
Yeah.
My name's Spencer. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Thank you for coming. Just wanted to know what some of the specific steps were that you're taking to increase youth outreach. I know you threw out the first pitch at the Little League World Series last year, but
I did.
Wanted to hear a little bit about that.
Okay. Youth is a focus for us because our research shows that there are two really strong determinants of fan avidity as an adult. The first and strongest is, did you play as a kid? And you didn't need to play in a high school, you need to play, a little league or whatever. If you played as a kid, you are much more likely to be avid. The second one's really interesting, the age at which you go to your first major league game. Orders of magnitude, I'm not going to be right exactly on the numbers, but if you go when you're 7 as opposed to when you're 10, each season you're likely to go to 5 more games live, which is a huge deal for us in our business, given the amount of inventory that we have. So we have 2 really distinct initiatives going with respect to kids. We've been very active in the youth space. We've studied the space. There's certain sports that are growing in terms of youth participation. Baseball is not one of those. But there are characteristics of the growing sports that we think we can help to encourage in baseball, and we think that we can, in fact, reverse that trend. I'll give you one example. Hockey is a growing youth sport. They have a nice top-down structure, very unified amateur structure. We do great in the 8 to 12 space because we have that kind of structure with Little League. If you know anything about the youth space, 13 up, kind of a lot of actors, not quite so organized. So we're trying to work with USA Baseball to take a stronger role in terms of organizing youth baseball and being a real driver for participation. In terms of getting kids to the ballpark, it's a whole different set of initiatives, most of them at the club level. The one that I like to talk about is the Red Sox have dedicated their season to a program they refer to as Calling All Kids. They have a separate gate for kids, a lot of activities, get them out on the field, a lot of activities
So sort of
focused on
going
kids
off of
and
the
getting
youth
parents to
baseball
get their
topic,
kids
I
in
know like one of the
ballpark,
big controversies right now in
and
baseball is Tommy John, and there's been sort of like some speculation that like playing year-round when you're younger or focusing on when you're pitching at too young of an age is sort of like one of the aspects that could ultimately lead to that. And so I know that you've implemented the PitchSmart website, and I was wondering if you were also looking to implement like a more hands-on program, sort of similar to the NFL Heads Up program, like in line with RBI or with the Place on Smart.
You are right about Tommy John. When we started looking at the issue, one of the first things that came to the forefront was the idea that we were seeing not only more injuries, but younger injuries. The orthopedists that we have on a committee that are working on this were very concerned that was a result of changes in the way kids were used. One of the PitchSmart is sort of step one of trying to make USA Baseball a better governing body for the amateur space. Putting out guidelines like PitchSmart is only a first step. The problem is if I put out the guidelines and a kid is playing Babe Ruth, his Babe Ruth coach may adhere to the guidelines, but he's also playing for some travel team. That coach may adhere to the guidelines, but when you put the 2 of them together, you got a problem. And so the next step is to try to organize that space with record keeping.
Going back to the youth baseball
question,
question,
we eliminate some of that overlap and misuse.
What do you think the role of the cost of playing the game has to do with,
guy with the blazer.
getting more kids to play? Major League Baseball does a great job with the RBI program, but what else do you think can be done to make the game more accessible to kids, whether it be financial or space? Because baseball can be hard to play in urban areas such as New York City.
The single biggest cost issue, particularly in inner cities, is facilities. We have a program with the Major League Baseball Players Association called the Baseball Tomorrow Fund. And what Baseball Tomorrow does is it builds facilities in inner city areas, largely populated with minorities, in an effort to address the financial limitations in terms of play. We also have built 6 urban youth academies around the country That's more of an elite program. Baseball Tomorrow is kind of a grassroots program. The urban youth academies are designed to, really capture kids that are interested in playing at that elite level. They're funded by baseball and by the local club, so the cost is not an issue. There's no cost to the kids that play in the program. We're also looking at involvement with a variety of actors in the youth space in an effort to deal with these cost issues, particularly at the travel team level. They're significant. I mean, they are significant issues. Andrew McCutchen wrote a great piece recently, made the point that, he kind of had an angel that, helped him in terms of having the ability.
I was just curious on
play.
what you think about like the future
But
international
we're involved
scope
in a
of the game.
variety of ways
Like,
to address
basketball's
those
had a pretty
concerns.
rapid expansion.
We do believe
Recently,
they're
so I'm
serious.
curious how anything for baseball has that. I was just curious on what you think about like the future international scope of the game. Like, basketball's had a pretty rapid expansion recently.
I think about our international efforts in two different categories. You may know we opened the season in Australia last year. Every other year, we're kind of on an every other year pattern of opening in Japan. Those are, we see those as forays into those markets. They're very important to us. We have pretty significant broadcasting arrangements in Japan because there's a lot of Japanese players that come here and play that generate a tremendous amount of interest. Taking our product to those markets is really important in terms of driving that broadcast business, our licensed product business. Same thing with Australia. It gives a boost to interest in the game. We actually have a 6-team league in Australia, a professional league that we run, and we get some players from Australia. Those activities are going to be limited in scope because of how far away those countries are. I mean, you can go and you can play a couple of games, excuse me, and you can come back, and there is a benefit to it, to our overall business, and there is a benefit to it in terms of the growth of the popularity of the game. I mean, Australia was fantastic. I mean, the two highest per cap days they've ever had in the Sydney Cricket Grounds were 2 baseball games, which is, the Sydney Cricket Grounds is a historic facility in and of itself. So, it does great things, but you can't sustain that activity. When I think about sustained international activity, I would like to see baseball with additional non-U.S. franchises. And I think the fertile grounds for those are the Caribbean, Mexico, and Canada. I mean, we have 1 team in all of Canada. Because of the geographics, I believe it is possible to play an entire season with franchises in those locations. And I think particularly with respect to Mexico, it's kind of the daily double, right? You expand internationally, and I think you would get great engagement.
So I was
with the
wondering,
Mexican-American
where do you think the
population
future
for
of
that
team
team.
building and scouting is going to be?
Really
Do you think it's going to be
important,
kind of like
area
the
for
person
us
with their
to do.
gut, like
And
triple
on
with the
our
curve, or do you
longer
think it'll be
term list.
more towards the statisticians and the metrics, like the movie Moneyball?
Well, we're never going backwards on the statisticians and the metrics. I was laughing about this earlier today. When I started in the late '80s, these whole, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but the baseball guys, it was like a black box. They couldn't explain. They knew who good players were, but how they explained that to you, there was this whole, they talked about 5 tools, and half of them couldn't remember what the 5 tools were, and they didn't know how they measured them, but they knew who players were. And then, we had this whole revolution in terms of analytics, and, frankly, my career was fueled by that, shift in terms of thinking. What I think you're seeing now is people are realizing, there was something to the old way, there's something to this new way, and I need to have some combination of these evaluation tools in terms of deciding how to put a club together. And, it's sort of a pendulum, and it's coming back a little bit, but it is a combination, not a shift away from one or the other.
I'm going to stick a question in here myself and ask about the next collective bargaining agreement. And if you think that there are issues, what might be the issues that will come up or be the biggest challenges?
I got this really clever ILR School alum, Dan Hallam, who's the Executive Vice President of Labor Relations. So I'm thinking Dan's going to take care of this, and I'm not really going to have to worry about it. But look, I am hoping that. But, you know, I think that you will see significant discussion in the area of international talent acquisition. I think we did a pretty good job on the domestic draft the last time around. Made a lot of changes in the international area. The early returns were kind of good. And then came the stressor known as Cuba. And it turned out that the system wasn't quite as good as we thought it was. And it's not just not good for us. I think, you know, issues on the player side as well in terms of equity and whatnot. So I think there'll be a lot of conversation on that topic. Draft choice compensation will be an issue. You know, there's really smart people involved in this process. And I will say the interesting thing about draft choice compensation is that we missed collectively, both the union and my people to some extent, on the combination of two sets of changes. What used to happen with draft choice compensation is, you know, the Yankees would sign a free agent and they'd lose their first round pick. So what they would do is they would take that first round pick money and they'd go find a high school kid who had a scholarship to UNC and they'd buy him out of the scholarship, maybe buy 5 kids out of scholarships in the hope that, you know, one of them would hit and turn out to be the substitute for their first round pick. When we went to the slotting system, we actually dramatically reduced the number of players subject to compensation, which the union wanted, and it was a concession on our part. What we didn't really fully appreciate was, however, that with the new system, you not only lose the pick, but you lose the money. So the slot money. So you can't go out and buy those high school replacements. Because you can't do that, people are less willing to give up the pick and the money together. I think that's one of those areas that the union is certainly going to want to revisit. You know, I think revenue sharing, always a topic.
Adam Kirsch, ILR Senior. So wanted to go back to the point earlier made about the internationalization of baseball, and not so much looking at exporting the game, but bringing players in. Do you foresee any changes to the posting system, and if so, what might those look like?
You know, we made some pretty significant changes to the Japanese system the year before last. I think that with professional players, we are always going to have some sort of system that respects contract rights, if for no other reason, to avoid litigation. I mean, remember that Japanese player that's getting posted, he has he has an employment agreement with a Japanese team, and if that Japanese team is not willing to let him out of that employment agreement, and one of our teams signs him, you got a mess on your hands, right? So I think that there's going to continue to be the need for some sort of system that provides compensation with respect to the professional player that moves. I think that, and I'm really thinking about Japan there more than anything else. I think the one that's going to be dicey is Cuba. And I think that Cuba's going to be dicey just because we don't, it's great. I mean, President Obama announced that, we were going to have a shift in policy. We haven't quite gotten to the details there in terms of what the shift's going to look like, what we're going to be allowed to do, what we're not going to be allowed to do. If you think about it, right? I mean, right now.
Hi, I am David. I am also a Pirates fan, and the one question I wanted to ask you was regards to player safety, and a lot of the reason why more parents are happy about their kids joining up with baseball instead of, let's say, football is they don't have to worry about their son getting tackled by a 250 linebacker who runs a 4.40. At the same time, we've had an increased awareness in concussions, especially when it comes to pitchers and also hitters. So we had Brandon McCarthy a few years back.
Right.
We have Giancarlo Stanton wearing the mask now. There was a report a couple pitchers are now wearing Kevlar hats. Is there going to be any push for a more unified let's say, agreement with the players' union to say, like, hey, these are the regulations you have to meet by your uniform so that we can play the game safely. And also with regards to that, getting rid of retaliation with hit by pitches in baseball. As a Pirates fan, I had to see Andrew McCutchen miss a huge chunk of the season because the Diamondbacks decided to retaliate on a terribly thrown pitch by a pitcher with a 10 ERA.
You should be a newspaper guy. There's about 10 questions in there. That's how all right, let me start with player safety. We have been probably the most aggressive league with respect to concussion issues. We went to a 7-day disabled list in order to make sure that we could get players who were concussed off the field for an appropriate period of time. We felt that one of the problems with the longer period on the DL is people with concussions didn't want to submit to being off the field for 15 days. We were the first league to get the baseline testing on concussions. 3 years ago, we reached an agreement with the Players Association on batting helmets that are good to 100 miles an hour. The industry standard prior to that was 85. We are working with the Players Association. Those Kevlar hats that you're talking about, we spent a ton of money trying to develop a hat that pitchers can wear that actually provides some protection in the event of a batted ball going back up the middle. So this is a huge issue for us. We do feel that the safety of the game, I missed the most important one, right? We took out the catcher collision rule. We didn't have a meaningful collision at home plate last year, and that was really one of the places where most concussions occurred. Retaliation. Retaliation is a tough issue in baseball. One fan's retaliation is another fan's, he didn't mean it because he doesn't have good control. It's really, I don't envy Joe Torre, who has to met out the punishments. He just did when I was walking over here, I read the press release on the incident that we had in in Kansas City the other day. Nobody likes the idea of people retaliating, particularly when the pitch is up and in. When it's down around somebody's buttocks, it's a little different. It's a little different problem. But up and in, or when you get somebody on the hands and you have an injury, everybody hates it. But it's been a part of the game for a really long time.
So a lot of players go through this kind of welcome to the show moment. I was wondering if maybe you could share your kind of like welcome to the show moment in your new job here as commissioner.
Well, I'll tell you two things, and the common theme is, when something like this happens to you, at least when it happened to me, maybe not everybody, it takes a while to actually realize that this happened. Because even when I went to work for baseball, when I took that job, I was thinking nobody had ever lasted as a labor guy more than 5 years. I'm thinking, I'm going to make a little money. 5, they're going to can me. I'll go back to Washington, practice law. This will all be good. I wasn't. There was no way I was thinking I was going to be the next commissioner of baseball. So it takes you some time to get used to the idea. But things happen, right? So the day I got back from Baltimore after the election, some of the licensing people who work with Rawlings, who makes our baseball, arrive in my office, and I'm trying to, I got a zillion emails, all these messages, and this guy arrives and he's got this stack of index cards, right? And he says, well, I need you to sign these index cards. He's got a whole mitt full of pens, and these index cards. I need you to sign these index cards. He said, we got to get, it's August and we need a baseball for next year and we got to get something mocked up and we got to do your signature. So I sat there and, while I'm sitting there, I thought I was back. I didn't go to Catholic grammar school, but I thought I was in a Catholic grammar school. They're like criticizing, I'm saying, but that's how I write. I wanted to, am I signing my whole name or am I, what am I doing? And then we had to go back and look at all the other baseballs. How did the other commissioners, did they sign their full names or whatever? So we go through this whole thing and we finally settle on this signature, and they actually took 4 or 5 and they mock them up. And when you see the baseball the first time, I saw 5 with your name on it, you got to pick one, and you're thinking, it starts to sink in, they're actually going to play this game. So You start getting used to it. And then I went down opening day, and this is a great youth story, actually. I'm going to digress for a minute here, if you'll bear with me. So I go to the Little League World Series right after the election. I'm standing in Williamsport. Is just a fantastic thing. I mean, it's all run by volunteers. It's just, it's a great piece of Americana. So I do a little press thing, and I'm standing in this hallway, and there's a group of kids from the Nationals, the Washington Nationals Urban Youth Academies. There's this 9-year-old. So I'm chatting with him, and I got to go. I say, my name's Dwayne. I'm Rob Manfred. Off we go. So I go to visit the Nationals Youth Academy in January, and I get out of the car, and this kid's walking towards me, and I'm like, this is August to January, a lot of water's gone over the dam. I'm looking at this kid, and I'm thinking, how do I know this kid? So he's walking, I'm thinking, I'm walking, and right when I get to him, I remembered this is the kid, and I remembered his name, Dwayne. So I call him by name, I shake his hand. So this kid follows me around, gives me the whole tour. So the Nationals call me and say, do you want to throw the first pitch out opening day? So I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So we get closer to it, and we're doing this whole youth thing. And I'm thinking, I'm going to call this kid and take the kid with me. So I get the director at the youth academy, gets him in the office, and I get him on the phone. I say, Dwayne, so here's the deal. I'm supposed to throw out the first pitch. I actually want you to throw out the first pitch, okay? And there's like silence on the phone, right? There's nothing, right? So finally he said, that would be great. And the phone call ends. I thought, this is weird. So the director of the academy had videoed the thing on the phone and sends me the tape. The kid was just speechless. He didn't know what to say, right? I mean, but the video was fantastic. So we get to opening day, and I'm standing in the dugout, and it was, you talk about how great our players are. He knows by name, like Michael Taylor, Ian Desmond, because these guys have all gone to this youth academy, and they're coming, like Ian Desmond comes over to him, and he's talking to him, and he says to me, he knows enough about this kid to say to me, this kid can play a little baseball, but you should see how good he is at art. That's how much he knows him. I mean, he actually knows the kid, right? So Desmond says to the kid, you're going up on the rubber, right? And I'm just thinking, oh my God, because the rubber's hard. It's a long way, and they always tell stiffs like us, go to the front of the mound, I mean, don't embarrass yourself. So I'm thinking, I got this 9-year-old, right? I mean, so I look at Ian. He says, don't worry about it. He'll be fine. So we're walking out, right? They hand me the ball. We're walking out, and Dwayne, the catcher's behind home plate, and Dwayne walks up on the mound. He looks at me. He says, it's not that far. So I look down. This gets back to the baseball. I look down at the baseball, and the baseball happens to be face up, right? I'm looking around. I'm standing in this stadium, right? It's full. I got this 9-year-old here. I got my name on this baseball. I really, this really happened. I mean, so, anyways, Dwayne. For those of you who have not seen it, Dwayne threw the best pitch. I mean, got it there, right down the middle. I mean, it was awesome. Just a great kid, but a great, sort of a great first thing to do.
Hey, my name is Matthew Lax. I'm a senior in ILR, and my question's around the whole idea of superstars in Major League Baseball and a lot of other sports, such as the NBA and the NFL. They pride themselves on having these huge sports stars like LeBron James or Peyton Manning, and something that Major League Baseball doesn't really have is kind of like that huge sports star. So I was wondering, a lot of people consider that we're past the era of 60 home runs a year and all these crazy numbers that were, shrouded in the steroid era. What is Major League Baseball doing in terms of marketing and development to kind of create the next superstar?
You have heard this Derek Jeter guy. You heard of him, right? All right, let me stop. I can't quite let you off the hook there. It's actually a topic that we're spending a lot of time on. We feel we're sort of at a generational point. Derek's the best, but his generation kind of all went in the last few years. But we have a great generation of young players. I mean, Mike Trout, Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw gave a speech at the writers' dinner in New York where they actually give the Cy Young Award that, if you could can it, just absolutely perfect. Giancarlo Stanton, unbelievable. Andrew McCutchen, fantastic. What we're doing is we went to each club this spring, and we put a professional writer we picked 4 or 5 guys on a team. And we didn't just do a bio. I mean, we did a real workup on the player. Who is he? Not just what he does on the field, but where did he come from? What's he interested in? What does he like to do? And we're working very closely with our national broadcast partners to do features on these players to raise fans' awareness of this new generation. I mean, it really does go on and on. You know, Felix Hernandez, you can just keep going. I mean, you know, but we do feel that the key to marketing those players is giving people what they want, and that's access. The difficult thing with baseball players on access is, think about it, 2 toughest numbers in baseball, 162 games in 183 days. I mean, I think I'm pretty hard working, but I'll tell you something. I don't go to work 162 days out of 183, and these guys do. And you know, a lot of those 21 days you wouldn't think of as off days. They're airplane rides, you know, and so getting time from them is a problem. So what we're trying to do is do things that we can scale, you know, use repeatedly and give fans the kind of access that they want in order to build their awareness of these really great guys. I wouldn't trade our player compliment. No rap on any other sport. I never do that. I mean, our player compliment is absolutely fantastic.
Okay, I have the last question. And the last question is if you could share some memory of ILR and Cornell from when you were a student.
Yeah, you know, I'm sure this stuff doesn't happen anymore, but it's actually funny because I saw one of the people that was involved in this just the other day. Is a partner at Proskauer, does a lot. They do a lot of our work, and Joe has done some of our work. But when I was here, Harry Edwards used to come back and teach a course on collective bargaining, and the final project was you had to negotiate an agreement, and it was you and a partner and 2 people on the other side. And you know, Joe and I both wanted to be management labor lawyers. I mean, that's really what we wanted to do. And Judge Edwards must have known a little something, because he put 2 women who actually have had, you know, really important careers in the labor movement on the other side, and they were really smart. And I don't know, we were okay, I guess, but it was like a war. I mean, it literally, this went on and on and on. Judge Edwards called us in at the end. He said, you know, it's absolutely amazing, given what I heard about what went on in this project, that you reached any agreement at all. So, you know, but it was a great experience. You know, he was a great teacher, and, you know, the people that were involved in that, you know, tells you how important this school is, because each one of them has had careers that are really significant in terms of, you know, the practice of either labor law or the union movement.
Great. So thank you very much. Sarah, you want to say one last thing? Go ahead.
I just want to thank everyone for coming, especially Mr. Manfred once again. We hope you guys all had a good time.
And Friday at 4:30 is what we have, wiffle ball.
Oh yeah, Friday at 4:30 is wiffle ball with the dean. So if
In
you
the
wanna
courtyard,
come out
the
and
lower courtyard.
play a little home run derby with the dean, he'll be out there in the courtyard of ILR.
So thanks a lot, Rob.
Thank you.